Good morning, New Mexico, and folks from around the world tuning into Cafecito con Colon. It's going to be a great day this morning. Let's come together, and you are about to hear from two great young leaders here in New Mexico. Good morning, Santiago. Morning, Selena. Good morning, Denise. Great to see you both. Kenneth.
Yes.
I'm going to send you a text message if you can check that out.
Cool.
All right. Good morning and welcome to Cafecito con Colon. Welcome back. We are thrilled you are starting your week with us, and I am grateful. Let's see here. Let me get started right away with some important links that I think are very relevant and hopefully you'll find enriching. And again, I always want you to go to these links after the show because I don't want you to miss a minute with these incredible guests we have on this morning, Devont'e Watson and Edward Kenneth Scott. These are two incredible young men who inspire me in a regular way, and I am grateful to have in my orbit. And it is fantastic to bring their voices to Cafecito con Colon this morning, which is also known as my extrovert therapy. On this 525th day as your state auditor, I couldn't be more thrilled than to be serving you, working for you, and bringing accountability, transparency, and excellence to government. And in addition to that, providing a space on Cafecito con Colon for engagement. This started out during the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, for me being able to continue to engage with people that I need to have in my world in order to help me stay enriched and fulfilled. And it came from a very selfish place, but it has turned into an opportunity for me to provide a platform for important discussion, to highlight phenomenal leaders in our community. And of course, during the last now more than a week and a half, an opportunity for us to, or about a week and a half, to come together and provide a platform for us to listen to people's lived experiences and to learn how, as a man of color who doesn't present with color, being Hispanic and not always looking Hispanic, it is important for me to listen and learn what it is to be a Black person in America today. Within the context of George Floyd's murder, it is a challenge, I think, every day to process all the incoming information in a way that's meaningful, in a way that allows us to be better allies, for us to better understand the perspective and the lens that these women and men look through, and the 400 years worth of history that comes with that lens. Whether it is intergenerational trauma, whether it is systemic barriers to success, whether it is systemic barriers to appropriate and constitutionally equity in our system, and the structures of power, whether they be in civil service or whether they be in the private sector. I think these episodes have helped us better understand and contextualize. And that comes from listening. And that's what I think we need to do at this time. So let me put up a few important links. Good morning, Carlos Lozoya. It is awesome to have you on. And thank you, Devont'e, for tagging our first, what is to be and who is to be our first Black man in the upper chamber of our legislative body of 112. Harold Pope Jr., Mr. Veteran and man of service. So thank you for tagging him. He is coming on later this week on Cafecito con Colon. If I knew my schedule off the top of my head, I'd tell you what day. It might be Wednesday. It looks like Wednesday. We're having Professor Rankin, Gibson Rankin, on tomorrow, who is an amazing lady. And Professor, let me start out by posting up some links, and then we will get on to our show with these two dynamic guests. A couple links I want to post up early, because I think that in the last 48 hours to 72 hours, whether it's because of Congresswoman Omar or many voices, I think there's beginning to be a dialogue that is taking place about defunding, abolishing, deconstructing, and looking through a new, looking for a new approach as it comes to law enforcement in America. And I think that in order for us to be able to hear and receive that conversation without instinctively reacting with our own kind of preconceived notions about public safety, I think we need to understand where this conversation is coming from and where it might take us in the future. So I want to post up a couple links that I think are on point as it relates to that. Thank you for tagging Ambassadora Idalia de Chugatena. Tom Gaida coming in from London. Boys, we got a guest from the other side of the pond to come here from Devont'e and Edward Kenneth Scott this morning. Welcome, Tom Gaida. Glad to have you with me. Good morning. So there is an interesting article from Demcast USA, but also I wanted to put up something more specific to Minneapolis. I think that's where maybe the eye of that conversation sits for obvious reasons. So there's a New York Times piece that was published that I think is helpful. The other thing that I bumped into on the New York Times I thought that was powerful was regarding some photojournalism with some really beautiful photographs that spoke to me about city summer, country summer, and the paths that Black boys journey in Mississippi and their Black brothers and sisters journey in New York City. And so I thought that that was somewhat powerful and a backdrop to the current conversation. Before we get on to our guest, I also want to post up, I know a lot of people are interested in listening, engaging, and being informed by some of the memorials and the services that are taking place for George Floyd. And the USA Today puts up a good roadmap to those that are taking place in the next few days, both in communities where he lived his life and other places. So I also want to give a kind of some props to KRQE, as I often do, for their solid coverage of current affairs in a way that I think accurately represents the circumstances and situation here in Albuquerque. Their headline is that peaceful Black Lives Matter protests continue. And I think that far too often the media has covered looting and violence and things of this nature when it comes to those who are trying to be heard. And we shouldn't necessarily discount that part of the story, but I think I have participated in more than one protest and demonstration and vigil that have been completely peaceful and that have been very, very powerful and impactful in engaging those of us who may not be women or men of color or Black, but have been able to listen. And Friday night, I was honored to be invited down to Socorro, New Mexico, to participate and speak at an event down there, which was very powerful. And I just think that by and large, hundreds of thousands of people have protested in a peaceful way. And I think that that is a part of the story that shall not and should not be forgotten. So those are a couple of things. I started out this morning. The first link on today's broadcast is the Department of Health's website for all information COVID related. We're approaching 9,000 positive cases in New Mexico, with a vast majority of those being represented on another community that is often forgotten and without a voice and without a seat at the table when it comes to addressing systemic and abject poverty. And that is our Native American sisters and brothers, particularly in the Navajo Nation. And there is some information there about that. Let's see here. I think in terms of the last link, in terms of good news and some fun things going on, I wanted to post up Wednesday night. If you're interested in, you enjoy classical music, the Philharmonic will be hosting a Wednesday night live concert. And I think you'll enjoy that with that fantastic violinist. Thank you, Pamela Herndon, for being a prior guest with a couple thousand views on your broadcast with Cafecito con Colon. And thank you for tuning in to hear from these Black men who are true leaders and wonderful, wonderful inspirations in my life. And good morning, Lynn Troy. I'm glad you're here. I did get a haircut. Thank you very much, my dear friend. And Anik, thank you for recognizing my haircut. I don't have as much hair as I used to, so I try and keep it as long as I can. But I did get a haircut. My brother and dear friend, Michael, threw his chair in his truck and brought it to my house. He brought his barber chair here and cut off all my hair. So thank you for noticing. Good morning, Elizabeth. Good morning, Billy. Appreciate you very much. Thank you for posting that link to the anti-racism Zoom. We talked on our last broadcast about how it is no longer enough to not be a racist. We have to be vigilant anti-racist. We have to be anti-racism in a way that we are so far in that we are actually hitting points of discomfort. If we're not comfortable with how hard we're pushing, then we're not pushing hard enough. And I hope that resonates, because for far too long, I think I have been in a space where I have been comfortable with my own actions, my own activity, my own engagement with young women and men of color, young Black men who I have mentored and poured into and been enriched by. But I am not sure that I can speak to, I'm not sure that I can say I often find myself in a place of discomfort because I'm pushing so hard. And that's the challenge for me. And I will be able to rise to that challenge because people like Kenneth and people like Devont'e help me be better informed about how to be in that space in an appropriate way that does not co-opt, but supports and allows me to be a positive ally. So with that, let me get ready to bring on two of the most dynamic men who have come into my orbit and have allowed me to be enriched by their insights, but most especially, I would say, to be inspired by their ability to rise above, to be an example for all of us, but in particularly for young Black men. And it has been on occasion that I have reached out and said, I have a mentee that I want to connect you with, and have you inform them and encourage them on their journey, because I can pour into young Black men all I want, and I do a lot. But I still come from a place that does not have the lived experience of a young Black man. So I hit a point where I don't have the capacity to be informed enough to be able to reach them in a way that is deeply personal and helpful. And it is people that I trust that allow me to do that. And these are two young men who I trust and inspired by, and I do welcome to Cafecito con Colon. Good morning, Kenneth Scott, Edward Kenneth Scott II, and Devont'e Watson, Devont'e K. Watson.
Good morning.
Good morning. Let me tell you, folks, before I open up this runway for them to just fly, I want to tell you a little bit, folks, about these two dynamic individuals from data point perspectives. And Kenneth Scott is currently the Deputy Treasurer of Bernalillo County. He's the Treasurer of the New Mexico Democratic Party Black Caucus. He's the Chair of Precinct 82, Ward 29, and a member of the State Central Committee of the Democratic Party of New Mexico. Our paths cross frequently, and I'm a better man for it. He has also been recently added in, because they had good foresight, they added him to the New Mexico Black Leadership Council board. And for the past 6 months, he has been chair of the Finance Committee of the Westside Dems, and he is running for chair of that incredible and important organization. He has a Bachelor's of Science or a BS in Political Science and he's got his master's in finance, both from the University of New Mexico, if I remember correctly. And he is a Lobo through and through. He is a leader through and through. He is an incredible young man who I have already signed up to be on whatever committee to elect he decides to establish, because we need incredible leaders like you, Edward Kenneth Scott II, in office here in New Mexico. We need your voice at that table in public policy. Thank you for joining me, Kenneth.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Appreciate it.
You betcha. Let me tell you also, before we move on and engage both of you, Devont'e has given me the honor and opportunity to be a part of his journey for quite some time now. And I have watched him grow into a man who not only who I love investing in, but who inspires me and who has exceeded expectations at every turn, whether it is his ability to be appropriate in engaging others, or in his ability to present in a way that really just makes my heart grow. Every time I interact with him, he has this uncanny capacity to lift me up, when in fact, I always try and make that my role to lift up others. I always walk away from Devont'e walking a little bit more on sunshine than I did before our paths crossed. And let me just tell you, he's a graduate of Volcano Vista High School, where he and I shared the humbling privilege of being our class presidents. And he was then at ASU&M at the University of New Mexico as the executive director and governmental affairs director for that leadership. He's a graduate of the University of New Mexico. He just couldn't figure out a way to just get one major, so he got two. He's got a double major in economics and international studies. He's got a minor in business management. He's got a certificate in national security studies and strategic analysis. And these gentlemen's background in finance is something that's close to my heart, as I have a finance degree from New Mexico State before I went to law school. And those backgrounds and degrees will serve you well, gentlemen. He's been a legislative policy analyst, most recently in our legislature in the lower chamber, but for our majority in the House. And he was appointed by Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham as special assistant to the personnel board. And as he is the founder and force behind Watson and Associates International LLC. Welcome, Devont'e K. Watson, and that K stands for Kurt, the Incredible Watson.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, and thank you for having us both on this show. I will say thank you for your leadership in the state of New Mexico, and also for the personal leadership through being a mentor, a brother, a friend. It makes all the difference, especially during times right now.
Well, it's been my honor, and any investment I make in you gentlemen is an investment well made, that's for sure. I never have to check my portfolio's daily returns when I invest in you two, because I know they're up. My stock is always up when I'm investing.
I do appreciate that sentiment.
And I mean it 100%. And I hope my actions have reflected that over the years. Let me just provide a space for each of you, and maybe we'll start out with you, Kenneth, to just tell a little bit about your journey, a little bit about that lived experience as a Black man growing up in our community, Devont'e, and you, Kenneth, on your journey, from where you were and where you are, and what that means in light of what we're going through now in this, what I always like to say each day, what I hope is not just a flashpoint, but is a tipping point in improving the circumstances and capacity for people of color in the United States?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and a really good, important thing that we need to discuss, because I believe you had Robert Gibson on Friday, and one of the things that he said that he's this regular guy, and he likes to have a space to say things that normally is reserved for people, I would say, like Devont'e and I, who are very politically minded. And the thing that's interesting about everything that's going on, first of all, Robert's not a regular guy. Let me go ahead and say that too. He's actually fantastic, a great comedian. I think he's understating just how important and influential he is in this community. But the thing that's interesting is that even though we had two completely different backgrounds, me going through the political route and, getting my MBA in finance and that kind of thing, we sort of shared this commonality, this shared experience of what it means to be Black in America and a Black man in America. Because I've had issues on dates with, cops in this community, in APD. I've had, racial profiling. So it's not a function of, your background necessarily. It's the function of, that being Black in America, which I think is really, really important. But no, to answer your question, I grew up in a largely middle class background. My dad was a retired military. He's also a retired cop. So he's given me a lot of really great insights into, what's going on and things that we can do to be a little bit better. But I'm the first person in my family to go to college, obviously the first person to get an MBA as well. But one thing that I like is that I'm the first, but definitely not the last. My cousin just graduated, and I've done my best to mentor him over the years, even when he started getting into trouble at school. And I have another cousin who's on that similar path. And I think it's important not to just be that first person, but to also help the next group along. I mean, you talk about mentorship all the time. Mr. Barkley, who I think I met through you. I think that's absolutely important to lift all of us up when we can. So that's something
I just spoke to Mr. Barkley this weekend.
Oh, and I haven't had to catch up with him.
I love that guy.
I absolutely respect and love Mr. Barkley. Need to catch up with him as well. But no, so I think it's important to continue to lift up everyone and bring people along for the journey as much as you can. But I can't impress enough on your viewers. If they think that, oh, well, this just happens to a certain class or socioeconomic status, it's not. It is throughout the entire experience of being Black in this country.
Can you give us a specific, and I know you have many and you alluded to it, I think it's important, as painful as it is, to really help people understand what is that like in terms of a specific circumstance where even you, as a Black man who got his undergraduate degree, first in his family to do so, went on to get his master's degree, now has risen to the level of deputy auditor for the largest county in the state of New Mexico of our 33 counties, and an incredible professional who came today dressed like the state auditor instead of the state auditor in a polo shirt. Tell us, let's laugh a little bit, but let's also have that uncomfortable conversation about what that is, because we can't really, I don't think we can personally invest in change unless we really understand or try to understand what that journey has been like for you.
Yeah. So anyone who's been in the car with me or has I've given a ride to or know me well enough, that I keep my registration and my proof of insurance in the door of my car, in the driver's side door. The reason why is because there's been a time when, I moved too quickly to reach for my registration and the cop jumped and put his hand on his gun. And the thing is, I can't impress on your viewers how terrifying that is, that in that moment, like I had to check with him, like, hey, are you good? Like, why'd you flinch? He's like, oh, well, you moved quickly, but I'm fine. Everything's fine. I'm like, well, your hand went to your gun. I just want to make sure I'm getting what you asked for. And think about that for a second. I had to calm him down in that situation. And if you've ever been pulled over a cop, anyone, it's already a tense situation. But I had to be the one to keep my cool head. So now I keep all of my stuff in my door so that when I get pulled over, I can just pull it on from my door and put it on my dashboard, and then take my ID out and put it on the dashboard, and then put both of my hands on the steering wheel so that I don't have to necessarily move, because I have a lot to live for. I love my life. I love what I do. I can't take a risk that someone's afraid of me, especially if it's just for the color of my skin. And again, that happens. It's not just my experience. I want to be very, very clear. I'm sure there's other brothers and sisters out there who have the exact same experience that I've had, and it's troubling. And it's troubling to continue to have these conversations. But that's what makes it so hard. And May was a really hard month for a lot of us, because in a lot of these stories, you see yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like you see, Mr. Cooper, who is just talking to his a fellow park goer in Central Park, and what that looked like, and George Floyd, who by all intents and purposes had an alleged counterfeit bill that cost him his life. But at the same time, I think there was a shooting at UConn, and they apprehended him completely fine, right, without anything going on. And we've seen that before. We've seen that with Dylan Roof in South Carolina and that kind of thing. So it's one of these things where, it just becomes taxing. I mean, I was talking to a friend of mine about going jogging, and then I stopped even thinking about going jogging because of what happened to Mr. Arthur, right? And I feel like, again, I can't take that chance that other people probably just don't even consider.
I appreciate that. One of the things that I don't think has been, well, let me say it differently. I'm sorry. For me, one of the most stark contrasts and dichotomies in approach has been the militia that went to take over the legislative house somewhere in the South. And I can't even recall what state it was in, but I believe it was in the South. And they came packing, and you see the line of officers that were there, I guess theoretically to protect the building, and these white men with weapons, and I mean arms, not just clubs, but arms and munitions, were literally inches from the face of those law enforcement officers, and they were just standing there. And as you know, that story ends, and no one ended up on the ground. No one ended up, losing their life while they were there yelling at law enforcement. I guess I didn't see wire to wire, so I guess I can't speak to exactly how it ended, but I suspect it ended much differently for those folks, and it certainly appears as though it ended much differently for those folks than for African Americans who are actually protesting without arms and munitions.
Right.
And so I just, for me over the weekend, for some reason that has just been something that's been in the back of my mind, and whether it's because I can't get the vision of those New York officers plowing through the barricade into human beings with their police vehicles. I can't get that out of my mind, but I think about that as opposed to what those officers did with those white men who were literally pistol packing.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. And I think, and look, I don't even pretend to have all of the answers, but I think a lot of it stems from sort of those biases that they come with being a police officer, already being afraid. So it's easier to, from what I've always been told, cops are taught a lot of threat neutralization, because, they have to sort of neutralize any kind of threat to themselves or to the public. And a lot of people say, well, that's a perfectly fine way to police. The problem, though, if you really think about it, is when you see me as a threat, not because of anything that I've done, but simply because of the color of my skin. That's where I think you have the potential of going very, very wrong. And I think that's really the basis for a lot of the things that are going on. And your example actually exemplifies that, if you think about it. The reason why they don't fear those white men is because they just don't have that same fear they have of me just driving my car. Again, I want to reiterate, I didn't do anything but move quickly, which I doubt. I'm old as dirt, right? Like, I don't think I moved that quickly.
First of all, Kenneth, I don't think you can tell our audience you're as old as dirt. You're like half of the age of the rest of us that tuned in today.
I'm an old soul.
More.
I'm an old soul. But still, like, it's just mind-boggling to me to have that perspective. Always. And I think that's why they need to change sort of the dynamic of how they train, from one of threat neutralization, I think, to one more focused on de-escalation of issues, and then really taking a holistic view of each interaction.
I appreciate that. I think your example of feeling like you can't go jogging is a very heavy example, only because we know that one of these data points that has been highly publicized is related to just that, a Black man who went jogging.
Right.
And so I appreciate you sharing that, Kenneth. And God bless you for staying so fit, even though you can't go jogging.
Oh, so
I'm
it's been
jealous.
a challenge. It's been a challenge. I'm not gonna lie. It's been a challenge.
You certainly haven't caught the COVID-19 plus.
I have. I just hide it well. And I hide it well because I'm wearing this. And I want to tell the viewers too. So one of the reasons why I'm in this tie, a lot of people, a lot of my friends who are watching, they know that I've been having the latest in COVID-19 fashions, in that I've been wearing a t-shirt and jeans essentially every day. But then I heard that Devont'e was going to be on, and I was like, oh my goodness, that guy is always dressed to the nines. Anyone who knows Devont'e, they know everywhere he shows up, he's just impeccably dressed. He's one of three men who I would say that about. The other being my friend, and as you mentioned, Mr. Colon, the next senator, first African-American senator from the state of New Mexico, Harold Pope, always impeccably dressed, always in three-piece suit, makes me look bad every single time. And Damian Lada, who also is always a very, very well-dressed man. So when I heard Devont'e was on, I was like, I gotta put on a suit, I gotta put on a tie. And so I don't always dress like this. It's just that I came prepared.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And you look fantastic. And I asked Devont'e to wear something very muted and very calm and docile to Cafecito con Colon. And obviously he doesn't always take my advice. No, I'm just kidding. Devont'e, you look like $1 million, buddy. Let me hear your story.
I'm representing right now. You know, we all saw that one movie, Straight Outta Compton, but I'm straight out of marching right now. So
all right.
Awesome.
Let me be very clear, Devont'e, you are always representing, and we are better for it. And I'm grateful for you, buddy. Will you tell us a little bit? I want to give you as much latitude as I can for you to provide your shared, your personal lived experience, and maybe it'll be somewhat of a shared experience with Kenneth.
Absolutely, there's a lot of shared experiences. But before I start again, thank you for having me. I want to start off with a poem, because I think that this is going to resonate among the shared experiences among African Americans and Black people, but also people that are marginalized in our communities. It's a poem by Langston Hughes, and he starts off by saying, "I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to the kitchen to eat when company comes, but I laugh and I eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow, I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody'll dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Well, besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed, because I too sing America." That was a poem written by Langston Hughes, a phenomenal poet out of the Harlem Renaissance. And what he was writing at that time is, and I, again, circle back to the shared experience of feeling represented. You said, fortunately, in the state of New Mexico, we do have great leaders such as yourself, and that represent and champion civil rights. But that's not always the case in some communities. And I believe what he was talking about there is having a seat at the table. When you don't have a seat at the table, that means you're on the menu. And I think that's where we are at in America, having policy that represents the serving and representation of the community, having policy that represents peaceful procedures in police operations. And right now there's currently a lot of campaigns and discussion to have this right type of conversation to create that discussion with elected officials, with policy officials, and also with community leaders, because it's a collaborative event, a collaborative force that must happen to create change. One thing that I really want to focus on this conversation is the elections coming up, and particularly the African-American vote as we talk about representation. I focus on a study that was presented by the Center for American Progress, And what they say is electorally 2016, we saw an increase in white turnout and a drop in African-American turnout, and the biggest margin among groups. They go on to say there was a significant decline in African-American turnout from 62.1% down to 57.2%, and a big drop in Clinton's share of the vote of African-Americans, whereas President Obama had 93.7%, and Clinton had 88.2%. And I want to really focus on that data because that really shows a possible trajectory for the African-American vote as far as engaging in, one, the Democratic Party, but then just voting entirely. Here in the state of New Mexico, and I take this quote from a guest that you've had earlier, Pamela Herndon, who says that in the state of New Mexico, although being 3%, mind you, in the past that has been deemed as statistically insignificant. And I want to bookmark that because that is quite of a microaggressive type of characterization. But when you look at the amount of African Americans in the state of New Mexico, I believe she says it's 4,800 eligible registered voters. That is significant to swing an election. And it's very imperative that we can get and optimize capturing these individuals to get them registered to vote, and then secondly, get them to the polls in their respective communities.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Thank you for providing that. And I think part of the other part that should go with that message is the imperative that Black men, Black women, Black families, people of color have to stand up and be counted in this census. And the federal government has made this as difficult as possible, with everything from early on telling us that we could send folks online, even if they don't have a code, and they'll be counted, to then 2 months down the road being told, oh, that was wrong. They have to wait, or they have to make sure that they get their code in order to be counted. And in rural New Mexico, in our communities of color, it just seems to me like they make it harder and harder to engage, and particularly when it comes to the census to be counted. That's why I'm glad that Kathy McGill has done everything she can with her tiny concerts and the work that iCount does to get people engaged. But not only do we have to vote, we have to make sure that we are counted. And in particular, I think that applies even more importantly to communities of color, Devont'e.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, just on race relations, I think that, as we're talking about representation, and we're really in a good point to drive policy, which is, I believe, a big factor in the development of a community right now, is revisiting the Kerner Commission report. That was a report by the Senate that reviewed race relations and cited race relations as a factor to the riots. The riots were not a result or the end. It was a causation or the end result of the race relations. And I think that if we revisit that report, fortunately, we have one of the senators who was on that committee, the Kerner Commission rather, Senator Fred Harris, in the state of New Mexico. And I think that if we draw upon leaders like that collectively with the African-American voice, again, talking about representation, I think that we could, one, address even the longstanding issues that we have in the state of New Mexico. I posted something last week that talked about that. And New Mexico, before 1619, right before Jamestown and the colonies, there was first Santa Fe.
Right.
and I think that's something that's not, and every time wonderful article by the Times, wonderful podcasting project by the New York Times, but I think that we need to have a conversation that discusses Santa Fe, because I do feel that was a primitive to the precursor to the colonies. At that time, we had Africans traversing across the land of enchantment. It wasn't even called the land of enchantment. It was home to indigenous peoples, and by the name of Esteban de Moor. I don't say Estebanico because, as we know, when we had a Ito, that kind of dehumanizes, so I do call him Esteban de Moor. And that's not even his real name. That was a given name. I focus on that and kind of reflect on the long-standing history of anti-Blackness in the state of New Mexico, taking part of the longer discussion. We may not have the level of news coverage of African Americans being shot, but African Americans are being shot figuratively with bullets of economic decline, bullets of underserved communities, and bullets of violence and structural violence that I think are being addressed. And that's what I talk a little bit in my TED Talk, is the proliferation of violence. I will actually post a link because I just uploaded that this week to Facebook and social media. But what I talk about in my TED Talk is the proliferation of violence, looking at violence through all lenses. There's verbal violence, there's physical violence, there's structural violence. And as co-chair of the NAACP state conference for the Economic Development Committee, we focus a lot about structural violence. There's a study that I focus on out of Harvard University by the name of Dr. Diva Pager. Her conclusion finds, after a field study in New York, that white women with a criminal background are more likely to gain employment. This is a rather old study, but in the 90s, still rather relevant, more likely to gain employment than African American women with a college degree. And I think that's a reality of a lot of people at communities of color, and that really hits on the point of structural violence. And if we could address that violence within all forms, whether it be a bullet, whether it be a bullet of economic underservice, or bullets of any type of violence, I think right now is the discussion to address violence in all forms.
I appreciate that. And I think that's fantastic framing, because it shifts our focus from the traditional sense of what the word violence is and what it actually translates to in the lives of Black women and men. And so I appreciate that shift. Devont'e, tell us, I know you've got a lived experience of having grown up here and gone to Volcano Vista, and now you have attained the status of lifetime member of the NAACP and the co-chair of the Economic Development Committee for NAACP New Mexico, under the leadership of Mr. Cotton, who I've got to call into to see if he's got some time to come join us on Cafecito con Colon. And I have known Mr. Cotton for many years, and he always brings a smile to my face when we interact, and I'm grateful for his friendship. Can you tell us, Devont'e, a little bit about your personal lived experience?
Yeah, so I'm not going to lie. I was kind of oblivious. I didn't really look at color until I got to about middle school, and I noticed, comments and, just different treatment. As I got older, became a little bit more aware. But I will say in the state of New Mexico, it's a little different. My dad's side of the family is from Louisiana. It's a little bit more open there as far as being racist and demonstrating your feelings on other people. Here, it's a little bit different. It's more subtle, unconscious bias that over time create a hostile environment. And I feel that that's where we are. At least that's what I feel. That's my shared experience. I use the I experience. I feel that, in that regard, I feel in somewhat ways burnt out, and I feel like, the state of New Mexico has its own trauma of race. We were colonized and under the dictatorship of three flags, in addition to, the national context right now. So it's coming to a point right now of, for me, a burnout of an experience. I kind of use an analogy, and we talked a little bit about it. A book called The Burnout Society. The author's name is Boying Chul Han, and he says that each age has its signature. Its signature age. So he talks about the bacteria age and the influenza age. Now we're dealing with neurological illnesses, and he uses the analogy of a cell. And he says cells, if they see a foreign object and encounter a foreign object, they are to accept it and become one with the cell, unless that object demonstrates itself to be adversarial. Then that's what we know as an autoimmune, to fight off whatever foreign object is trying to come near. So that really demonstrates and illustrates rather the disconnect with our innate biological structure to accept and embrace others that are different, and to be accepting unless they're adversarial in some regard. But that really just shows the disconnect, and I feel that my lived experience shares a lot of that. Unfortunately, right now, that's why I'm joining with my brothers and sisters on the streets marching and taking the risk, wearing a mask. I have it right here. Hopefully it matches today. But that's why we're going to the streets, and we're causing a peaceful disruption in the communities to voice our opinions and circling back to being represented. And I think that representing this and being that representation and light in the street and letting others know and sharing that light for those that may not typically have drawn their attention to this subject.
And that's a perfect segue, Devont'e. And I'd like both of you to speak to two things. One, and I've been really kind of getting this message and saying it as frequently as I can, that I don't want this to be the flashpoint. I want this to be the tipping point, because far too often over the last 6 years, since the inception of Black Lives Matter, we have seen time and time again, whether it's been by stories that are recounted to us, or whether it's been actual video footage of atrocious behavior by those in power. This can no longer just be a flashpoint, and we're not talking about it in 6 months anymore. Whether it's been about this issue, whether it be about gun violence, Americans have a short attention span.
Yes.
So I am so optimistic, and it feels like this is different, that this isn't just going to be a flashpoint, it will be a tipping point. So number one, what can we affirm about this moment in time that makes it a tipping point, if we are correct, and if you agree with that sentiment? And I thank you, Kenneth, for that affirmation. And then number two, how, from your perspective, which is so important to me, how can I and others be better allies during this moment in time? And either one of you can go first, and we'll just kind of open this up conversational style. And I'm going to bring us all to camera, and maybe we can have a visit about that during the last 10 minutes, and we can take it wherever you want to go.
Yeah, I guess, Devont'e, you want to start, or you want me to start?
How about you start, since I just got done speaking?
Fair enough. Yeah, so I absolutely agree with you, Brian, that this does seem to be quite a tipping point. And one reason why I feel that way is and maybe I'm the internal optimist. You know how I am, Brian. Devont'e, you know too. I'm always smiling, always laughing. But one thing that has absolutely been just a joy to see in all of this is that a lot of people have come and tried to be allies, as opposed to in the past where you may not necessarily hear from anyone. I've had an outpouring of calls, Kenny, just checking on you, making sure you're okay. How can I help? And you've never seen that, in my opinion, during the past when you had events, but just the people who are just like, hey, I'm going to stand with you. Let's get this done. I think one of the most important things that needs to happen, Devont'e said this earlier, is voting, right? People need to register to vote. They need to actually be active and engaged. One thing that gets a lot of attention is obviously at the top of the ticket, Donald Trump, Senate elections, and that kind of thing. And by all means, those are very, very important. But a lot of the changes that we need to see done and need to see come to fruition are actually done at the state and local level, which means you need to be just as engaged on those races as you have been in the president, Senate, and Congress, now more so than ever. And not only that, then keep and make those leaders accountable, right? When you win an election, to me, you have a responsibility to be accountable to the people, not only the people who voted for you, but also the people who didn't, and to bring about change that would be beneficial to the communities in which you serve. I know some of my friends have reached out to me to see how they would get more involved as being a voter registration agent. And I promise, if they're listening, I am going to pass you on to the county clerk. I don't know if she's listening, but that's absolutely critical. Absolutely critical.
I appreciate that. And I think that accountability is so important. Even when I posted my letter, which I appreciate you reviewing, Kenneth, and once I posted it up, you took a look at that, and I appreciate you doing that. With my post, I ended that post with "hold me accountable."
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's enough to just say that elected officials have to be accountable. We actually have to invite those accountability pressure points. And you are in such a position to be an accountability partner for me. And if I'm not inviting that, then I'm doing a disservice to my own service and to the community.
Agreed.
Thank you for talking about that accountability. Devont'e.
You know, I'm just going to add on that. We talked about the census. We talked about voting. Now it's time to make the informed type of vote. And I will ask people to get plugged into your local newspapers, call your elected officials. Here in the state of New Mexico, we have a unique opportunity to where we could engage with our legislatures on a personal level. We could see them actually shopping and approach them, or go to their committee hearings, or we could even go to the House floor even and walk around on a normal year, not a special session, probably, and approach them and engage dialogue with them so that we can make that well-informed decision at the poll. I will draw some attention to some to agendas that may inform your audience on what type of discussion we could have with our policy leaders. So we talk about Black Lives Matter, yes. There's a global initiative that takes on the human initiative as well. And it's the 2030 Agenda by the United Nations. It's a list of 17 agenda items ranging from no poverty, no hunger, good health, peace and justice, partners for goals, that I think that we could implement at a local level. So if we want to vote, but then after we get those in, before and after we get our votes in, we should be having these type of discussions with our leaders. Then secondly, there's another initiative called 8 Can't Wait for police brutality. It's an organization, hashtag 8 Can't Wait to take action now, calling for a comprehensive reform for police procedures. Eight initiatives ranging from ban choking and choke and strangleholds, require de-escalation, require warning before shooting, and a couple of others that I think that the audience may find interesting as they go to the polls and we have these discussions through our democracy.
I also want to add too that I think one of the things that has changed, and thanks for posting that 8 Can't Wait link, Brian. I think that's really amazing. Speaking of, APD has 6 of the 8, I believe. I could be completely wrong. I think they're working on the others. But also, you know, one other thing that I think is different about this and why I call it a tipping point is I see all the people who are holding some of their friends, and in some cases former friends, accountable for some of the statements they've made that have been hurtful in the past. I think that's absolutely critical as well. And to me, more indicative of the fact that we're at sort of that tipping point that you required, that it's not okay just to not be racist, you know, to be anti-racist and to call out people who are doing that. You know, going back to this sort of the shared experience, I can honestly say that, you know, I love New Mexico. It's home now. I think it's a beautiful state. There's a reason why I've settled here, you know, but it has been issues with racism that I've felt here, you know, on a personal level, which, to be honest, I've always never quite understood where it came from, because, you know, I come from the South, and in the South, you know, all the minorities kind of like hang out together, bond together because we have to. So to come out here and you know, have racism, say, from an Hispanic person, actually was kind of jarring to me. And I would add that anyone who's from the South would probably share that same sentiment. So it's important to continue to, while know that we're getting there and it's a tipping point, but to keep that pressure on, to keep holding some of your colleagues accountable, your friends accountable, and make sure that this is a space for everyone.
You know, I think I appreciate you saying that. And it is jarring because we love to think about that which is good of New Mexico. And for the most part, there are many people that embrace the values of truly having a beautiful state that embraces its multicultural components. But the truth is that we have racism in New Mexico, just like everywhere else, coast to coast. And, you know, I even think of my own experience and growing up and thinking about, particularly this last few days, as we think about what happened in Normandy on this anniversary time of that landing. And I think about a post that was done by, I don't remember who posted it, but some fantastic statistics about African Americans that served in that war that protected my grandmother's family who were in the concentration camps, who were being annihilated by the Nazis. Yet, because of, I think, the scarcity mentality that generation grew up within, and the systemic approach to dividing and conquering and putting one minority against another minority, I think we still feel the effects of that today. And I haven't seen any peer-reviewed articles, and probably both of you highly educated Black men have seen this stuff, but I suspect it's out there. Because when I think of my grandmother's racist approach to Black men and Black women and using pejorative terms in Yiddish to reference those individuals, it breaks my heart because I remember being very confused by that. And my mother telling me it was a different time and a different generation. And somehow that made it okay.
Right.
Or having a lack of accountability. Well, whatever generation it was, whatever time it was, I hope that time is over.
And it seems that it might be. Like I said, like to your point that you keep bringing over, that it's a tipping point. I see, and it warms my heart. I see people who are literally, you know, even the ones who necessarily didn't understand, you know, some of their racist views in the past have come to terms with, like, you know, Kenny, now I get it. I understand what you've been going through. I understand what you've been saying. And even that's welcome, right? Even the people who have sort of to change their mindset to become better, to work to become better. I think we're gonna get there. You know, New Mexico, as I've told a lot of people, has so much going for it. There's so much potential in our state. It's a beautiful state. It's beautiful people, culture. But this is something that would hold us back. And I think, at least from my perspective, people are starting to really understand and realize that. And that's heartwarming.
Thank you. Me too. Devont'e, how do you feel? Do you agree with that sentiment?
I do. I'm really optimistic right now. And I think that the community support, overwhelming support to engage in this conversation is not just African Americans, and it can never just be done with one group. Dr. King says that our suffrage and our success is inextricably bound together. And I think that as we have these discussions and continue to grow together, and that's what it is, it's a growing moment. We are not foreign to these type of discussions. Similar when, you know, with leadership changing nationally, in around the time of 2016, I remember having a conversation with Santita Jackson, the daughter of Jesse Jackson, and she said, I remember just being really distraught over the national events that were happening, and she said something to me that I continue to keep with me to this day. She says, you know, so the march continues, and good. These type of initiatives, or excuse me, the type of beloved community that we want is going to not come free. It comes by marching. It comes by individuals like both of you being at the table and championing our communities for the prosperity of us all. So I really thank you, and thank you, Kenneth, for saying that, to allow me to tack on to that. And I'm really optimistic of where we're at as a country. And I think that in the words of hip hop, a lot of people are getting woke.
Well, that's right. And I appreciate that. And I try and be more woke today than I was yesterday. And hopefully tomorrow I'll be more woke than I am today. And I know that that's true at 10 o'clock this morning because I got to spend the last hour with you two dynamo superstars. And I'm grateful. And if Catherine McGill says she's cautiously optimistic, my goodness, we might be headed in the right direction.
All
Because
right.
Catherine McGill has seen a lot, she's done a lot, and she holds me accountable. And I'm grateful for her joining us today. So many people joined us today. You know, we had 50, 60, 70 people online with us live today, and it's because they're attracted to hear from two incredible young Black men who are a phenomenal voice for our community. And I'm grateful for your leadership. I'm grateful for your civil service. Both of you are civil servants, and I always am quick to say that we don't celebrate our civil servants enough. So let me celebrate you this morning and thank you for doing that and for being in the civil sector. I know you could spend a lot more time and make a lot more resources for your pocket if you stayed in the private sector. So thank you for engaging and trying to make this community better with civil service. I will give you the last word, which I don't usually do because it's an uncomfortable place for me to be. But I want to give you each the last word, and we'll start with you, Kenneth, and then we'll close with Devont'e. With maybe we'll take 2 minutes to just close with your final thoughts. And I just want to close with my gratitude to both of you for allowing me to have you in my orbit and for allowing me to ask you to be accountability partners with me and to allow me to take just a little bit of pride in the most humble way I can to know that I am here cheering for you every step of the way, and you are doing a wonderful, wonderful job of being leaders in our community. Thank you both.
Oh, and thank you for having this space. I don't think you understand, or maybe you do, how important it is to have these kinds of dialogues, just so that we can learn from each other, to learn from our experiences. Because I hope that your viewers and my colleagues in the community understand more about what this is about from my perspective and why, you know, Kenny's been a little down in May and that kind of thing. As a result of this, because I think that these kinds of conversations can drive legitimate change. So I think it's very important. So thank you for doing that. I do share Ms. McGill's assessment of being cautiously optimistic, but I am cautiously optimistic because of things like this and because of the conversations I've had with others that let me know that one, I have allies, and I think it's important to have allies, but two, that we have the momentum to really drive some substantive change in our communities and in this country. So thank you for having me, and thank you, Devont'e, for also being my co-interviewee on this. I do appreciate it. Devont'e is absolutely, as you guys can tell from the last hour, he's an amazing, amazing person. A wealth of knowledge, makes me better every single time he comes by the treasurer's office to talk to Madam Treasurer Burch and myself. It's always a joy. Hopefully you can do that more soon whenever we're post-COVID-19.
Post-COVID-19, yes. and thank you both again for this wonderful conversation. I feel like I grew as a result of this conversation, and thank you again for having this space day and for allowing African Americans to have this space and to have a platform to share it with the state of New Mexico. I think this is a form of activism in itself by allowing others to have a different type of perspective, or to hear a different type of perspective through lived experiences.
Sure, you're very welcome. You're always welcome in any space I'm in. You are welcome to come occupy it with me. And I am a better man when you are beside me. Devont'e, let me see your wrist. What are you wearing on your wrist there?
Oh, these are Navajo pearls. I think you and I are twinsies.
That's right. That's right. That's right. I think you first noticed this on me several years ago, and I've been wearing mine for years from Lawrence Baca, and it's good to see you in some.
And I had to get them as a result of seeing you. I said, okay, I'm going to be like my mentor, Mr. Brian Colon.
Well, it's an honor to have you with us. These were done by the incredible Lawrence Baca, a phenomenal lifetime achievement artist in our Spanish Colonial Art Society. And they look better on you than on me, my friend. Thank you very much. As always, you bring your fashion in a strong game, and I appreciate it. Thank you both for being with us on Cafecito con Colon. I love you both. I appreciate you both more than you know, and we are a better community because you've chosen to make this place where you plant your flag and you say, not only will I be seen, but I'll be heard. And we are listening. Ladies and gentlemen, guests on Cafecito con Colon, reach out to 3 women or men of color and make sure they know that they may be isolated, but they're not alone. Make sure they know that they are not just seen, but they are heard. They're heard by those of us that are here today, whether it is people like Robbie, who so authentically posted on his Facebook page that he has been guilty of making racist comments and jokes and committing microaggressions against people he cares about, even unknowingly or subconsciously, and not just accepting that and embracing that and publicly saying he is going to be a better man, but then also taking the next step of holding his peers accountable. And he has unfriended people over this weekend who are not willing to provide a space to be welcoming to individuals who are embracing that idea that we all can do better and be better. And so thanks to everybody who is just a little bit better person today than they were yesterday, and hopefully embracing the best versions of themselves that they can be tomorrow. And I know that I am a better man for having spent this hour with these 2 incredible leaders. Thank you, Devont'e. Thank you, Edward, Kenneth, Scott the second.
Thank you.
Make it a beautiful week. And as always, you got my cell number. Don't hesitate to use it, gentlemen. Bye-bye now.
Sir.
Thank you.
Take
Happy
care.
Monday and have a great week.
Happy
Great week,
Monday.
guys.
Have a great week. Bye-bye now.
Bye.